Hello and welcome to Arizona Talk Radio with Rob Scribner, and this is a special presentation of survival at home and abroad. Hello everyone and welcome to Arizona Talk Radio, and this is a special presentation of survival at home in case we had an emergency or disaster or power grid go down. I want to go through 30 tips of what could help you survive such a terrible thing. And so I'm not doing this out of panic. I'm not saying, oh my gosh, the world's going to end or anything like that, but we could have a lot of crises, and some things here in Arizona might be a little bit unique, but at the same time common to no matter what region you live in. So what I'd like to do today is go through 30 tips and ideas to help you prep and be prepared in case we have an emergency or need to survive on our own. And I think what we need to do is to make sure that we open our minds to realize that how life is today would totally change overnight if we were to lose our power grid. What would happen if we didn't have internet and we didn't have electricity and we didn't have anything to stay cool or stay warm? And what if you can't go to your ATM and get money? And what if the grocery stores are closed? There's looting, things like that. And he's like, oh man, he can't even comprehend that, I know. But it could happen, and it would happen fast. So today, please join me in reviewing 30 ideas of how to survive in case of emergency. For our first tip would be, right off the bat, start putting away some cash. In our case, what my wife and I have to do is we have a very large, one of those little ceramic pigs, and we not only put change in there, but we actually put cash in our little pig, you might say, and just keep adding 5s, 10s, 20s, 100s if you can do it, and just over time get some cash, because you will not be able to use your debit card. And most of all, if you don't have cash, you might want to make sure you get a hold of something unique like gold and silver. Something that's worth something to another person, because not only will you need cash, but you also need things to trade. So keep that in mind. Make sure you have cash in your household. I don't care if you put it in a jar and bury it in the dirt. Have some cash. Number 2, get out of debt. Now, I know that sounds easy, and it can be, but it depends on your situation. But here's what you need to think about, is if a disaster happens, it all depends on the magnitude of things. But if you owe money on a car, or you owe money on a trailer, or you owe money on your house, there could or could not be debt collectors after you, and they're going to be ruthless. And so that's where we'll get into talking about bugging out. So eventually your shelter, if it's a mortgage, you may not be able to stay there. Now, if it's a disaster going on and the entire economy is crippled, it could be that you could hang out and hold up in your home. If you own your home outright, that's great. But remember, your home is probably going to eventually lose its water supply. It's going to eventually lose its power or lose it immediately. It could be located in the city, and in the city is not necessarily where you want to be. We'll talk about that later. And you'll also may be forced to bug out. And you probably heard that terminology, bug out, and getting a bug out bag and stuff. You may need to hit the road. Maybe your family has a place to go, a safe place, or a place where we're all going to accumulate. Like Sherry and I, we have the option of hanging out here, but we have a mortgage, so we have the same problem you do. But we do have an RV located in a certain area, and we would maybe strive to go find that RV, because the RV has some things in it that would be a little easier to survive in with limited resources. So yeah, getting out of debt. So if you can get rid of those credit cards, you can get rid of all those little things, take care of those first. And if you mortgage, well, it is what it is. Keep it in mind. But getting out of debt is the first thing you want to do, because it can get very ugly, and it would probably get even uglier when things are not regulated the way they should be, and you could be in a heap of trouble. So number 2, get out of debt. Number 3 would be gold and silver. I mentioned that a little earlier in the show, is if you need to put away cash. Cash will have some value, but nothing will beat good old-fashioned gold and silver. So if you happen to have silver coins, that could probably help. To buy pure silver, pure gold, that's going to have value even in a disaster, even when the economy's gone into we're going to survive some way or another, and everything would be based on silver and gold again. And so to have some would actually be your benefit. So having cash, having gold and silver, and I would also suggest having things you could trade. Now think about, in a disaster, what could you trade to get things that you may need that someone else has? And it could be something to do with survival. It could be water, it could be matches, it could be survival gear, clothing. You'd be amazed. And in the future, some of the things that we're talking about, you could buy some of these things that we're going to talk about at a Goodwill, a place to get it really cheap when we start talking about clothing and things like that. But think about some of the things that would be worth trading. That would be very important. But most of all, make sure you invest in a little bit, or at least as much as you can, in gold and silver, because there will always be a reliable source for trading and buying things. Number 4, try to move away from the city. And I know, once again, that sounds easy, but it could be tough. If you live in the city, which a lot of people do because of their jobs and stuff like that, unfortunately, all mayhem would start there. And the best thing to do would be get out and bug out. So because what will happen very quickly is a lot of looting, food would run out, there's a large number of people trying to just survive and get food and water and things like that, and crime would be at its highest, and it could be actually quite deadly. I would immediately, as soon as you know the situation is bad, is get out of the city, get out to the rural and even farther out as soon as you can, because first of all, you're going to need resources, and those resources are not in the city. So number 4, let's not forget, try to get out of the city. Number 5, yes, this is going to sound kind of silly since we live in Arizona, but most likely you're going to head for the north. Most likely you're going to start heading towards Flagstaff and the mountains, maybe even up to the northwest. And so Arizona people are probably going to be the worst about not having warm clothing. Yes, warm clothing, and I'm talking about good stuff. And what I'm talking about is like wool, whether it's blankets, socks, sweaters, things like that. One is you can't go wrong with wool when it comes to staying warm. Now the good news is it's very affordable if you go to places like Goodwill, and places where you can, people, especially in Arizona, are probably getting rid of that kind of stuff, and you can get a good deal on it. So buy yourself some, find yourself a wool blanket and wool socks and clothing and good even underwear, things like that, to be prepared for cold. Because if you head up towards Flagstaff up north, you're going to be up against temperatures you're not used to. It's easy to dress down, but another thing that would be very important in Arizona is something to create shade, whether you're carrying a plastic tarp with you, which by the way would not last that long because the sun will just tear it up, but some kind of blanket or some shade protection that you could create when you decide to rest. Shade is going to be precious, just as precious as water. So there you go, warm clothing. Number 6, good hiking boots and comfortable shoes. So if you do not have good shoes, you're going to suffer something fierce, especially if you have to bug out. So make sure you have good hiking shoes, waterproof preferably, and good socks, of course, to go with those, because if you get your feet wet, you'll be miserable. And the other thing I want to add to that is keep your feet warm and dry, and keep your head warm and dry. So to go with that, I'm going to also say make sure you have something to protect your head and keep you warm, like a good wool hat or something, scarves and things like that. Keep your head warm, but keep them feet comfortable and dry. Important. Number 7, believe it or not, gas masks. Yes. Probably the most critical thing next to water is a gas mask. Now, it may only be temporary. It could be where you're in the city and things like that. It could be a lot of fires, which means there's going to be toxic chemicals burning and things like that. So once again, you can actually find good deals on some of this kind of stuff in an Army surplus store and stuff like that. But yeah, a gas mask is something that I actually haven't heard that a lot. And I thought it was a very good idea. So some reason you come across something where you can get a set for your family, I would suggest getting it. So it may seem silly. You may say, oh, but it could be just a temporary thing. But a gas mask could be quite critical to your survival, right next to water. Number 8, axe, shovel, and knives. Yes. So these are going to be critical tools. Now, you can actually go to survival stores and stuff like that and actually get combination of things. But you're going to want to be able to saw wood. You want to be able to dig holes. You want to be able to make your shelters and stuff like that. So these are critical tools. A good machete, especially when a saw blade on it, you would be amazed the things that you'll do with these tools. And they're critical to your survival. And you can shop around. I would suggest that you buy high quality. I wouldn't go cheap on these things. I'd get yourself a good survival shovel. Some of them have combinations of things that the shovel can do. Good axes. You do not want a cheap axe. It could be a very critical tool to survival for building fires and building shelter, etc. So yeah, axes, shovels, and knives. Number 9 would be self-defense equipment. Now, I'm not talking about offensive, I'm talking about defensive. And so we'll be talking about that later. But things that, if you're going to be hitting the road or getting, bugging out, you want to look for deterrents. And things about, one is animals would be one, and of course people. And yeah, you can't necessarily rely on a gun. The longer that we're surviving, the more that ammunition and things like that would be precious. So think about defensive equipment and tools to protect yourself from, unfortunately, people and animals. Number 10, this is pretty important if you're going to rely on a gun, is ammunition. There's other kinds of weapons we'll talk about, but ammunition, this is the time to buy it. First of all, pick out your favorite weapon. For example, I have several. I have a 284 Savage. I love that rifle. It's kind of lean, mean shooting machine. I have a heavy-duty Browning 300, and that's kind of like a bazooka, and that's kind of an overkill and heavy. I also have a Merlin, which is like a 30-30 Winchester with a scope, and that would probably be my favorite because of it being lightweight, easy to carry, and having a scope to help out with long-distance shots. And the ammunition would be fairly reasonable. The problem is there's actually some shortages on ammunition right now. So it's be critical to buy your ammunition now while you can, because you know what's going to happen if we go into survival mode. looting and all that kind of thing, you're not going to be able to get ammunition. So you need to get it now. And, look for your sales. Go to your places like Cabela's and your pro bass shops and stuff like that, and different sporting goods shops, and maybe it'll have some of it on sale and buy quantities of it. So there you go. Ammunition. Get it now. Number 11, compass and maps. When things go amok, we may not be able to rely on our cell phones. We may not be able to rely on any kind of our GPS systems, or you may run out of power, may not have batteries, things like that. So conventional navigation is going to be important. So a good compass and having maps of the regions that you are familiar with, that you want to go to, I would say is critical, because when you want to get around, you want to hit the back roads. You don't want to be in the populated areas. You can buy all kinds of little devices and kits. Like, for example, you can see the little things for your arms, which are actually spare rope, and also has a compass on it. So and I haven't mentioned it earlier, but having all types of rope is going to be critical. Nylon rope is my favorite because it's small and light and strong. So compass and a map. Number 12, a Swiss Army knife or something similar. This is one of those tools you look at and you go, man, this is a crazy device to have. But you won't think it's too crazy when you're out, when you have to bug out. These things will have every little tool that you can think of, from scissors to small saws to bottle openers to knives, to clip your fingernails, to take care of all kinds of little things that you will not even think of. Trying to open a jar, trying to open up a bottle. It goes on and on and on. And of course, everybody calls these the Swiss Army knives, but they also have other companies that make different versions of pocket knives like this. So check it out and make sure you get one, a Swiss Army knife. Number 13, probably one of the most important items, is a good bug out bag or a good backpack. And they come in all shapes and sizes, and it's going to depend on the size of your body and what you can handle. But if you have family members, maybe you just have teenagers or maybe small kids, you'll want them to have some kind of backpack, but you'll need something that fits their size. Just remember, you're going to be carrying your shelter, a tent, your sleeping bags, blankets, all kinds of survival gear, along with food and survival items and weapons and ammunition, and on and on and on. You're gonna have to be able to carry a lot, and you want to be organized, and most of all, you want to keep it dry and safe. And it's got to be a comfortable bag, one that fits you well, one that also attaches around your waist to carry some of the weight against your body differently. I would not, obviously, if you're in a survival mode, you take what you can get, but really for long term, go out and buy good equipment. Go buy good backpacks. Number 14, forms of shelter. Of course, we're talking about possibly tents, materials like to make shelter that help keep you dry. Would be nice to have some kind of tarp or some kind of insulation. So make sure that you have a tent or something to make shelter along with rope, and making sure it's something that helps keep you dry. I would not look at cheap tents. I'd put a little money into those and make sure it's a good quality tent. And by the way, it's a great excuse to go camping with the family. Number 15 would be clean water and filtering water. This is going to be critical once again. Of course, even if you're drinking rainwater, that could be a problem. So make sure you get some of the filtering tablets or purifying filters. You can get little bags that you can hang from a tree and then run the water through a little filtering system. And you can also buy different kind of cartridges and different kinds of like thermoses that actually have little filter systems in it. So Getting clean water is going to be important, and even if water up in the mountains seems clean, you still want to filter it because it can be parasites and things like that in it. So make sure you have something to purify your water. Also, this is going to be critical. Find something where you can boil your water. So make sure you're carrying something you can put water in and boil it. Number 16, lighters, matches, and candles. Critical. So you're going to want to build a fire. You're going to need light. You're going to be able to create a fire, and there's so many ways to do that. You could use even a battery and steel wool if you had to, but having a supply of matches, lighters, go buy a 4-pack of lighters. That's what I did, and put that in my prepping room back that we have. Having all kinds of candles are affordable. They're nice to have, and they'll perform all kinds of things for you. Most of all, to provide light, and anyway, and it can be even helpful when building fires. Having a flint is important. I wouldn't rely on electronics too much. So even having good old-fashioned wood matches, keep them dry, put them in special waterproof containers, and make sure that you can always, no matter where you go, build a fire. And by the way, having steel wool is like a miracle stuff. And a little battery, you take a little steel wool and a battery and then just short it out. There you go, instant fire. So yeah, not hard to do, not expensive to do, but having a means to build a fire. Number 17 will be flashlights and lanterns, and they come in all shapes and sizes. Now, just remember, if you're going to get flashlights or lanterns that depend on batteries, then you need to stock up on lots of batteries. The best solution long-term is to have something that's either crank or can recharge itself by solar. And these are all available, all shapes and sizes. So yeah, get out there, get some good flashlights, get at least a couple that can recharge themselves by either with a crank or with solar. Number 18, pretty important, food, stirring up food. So this is something that one is bottled water is going to be critical. So you can find those go on sale at Costco's and things like that. Stock up on bottled water. And I want to remind you, when we're talking about food, keep in mind that you're going to need to keep in mind your kids and your pets. But one of the things that we do is once a month or so, we buy a week's worth of dried food. And we also have an RV located in a specific area, and we actually keep a week's worth of dried food in that too. So in case we had to bug out and that was our destination, we know that once we get to the RV, we also have a supply of water and dried food. So dried food you can buy in these, if you see one of the pictures in here in white there, you can buy these little containers that are a week's worth of dried food. And they average from $50 to $100, depending on what they are. They can be all kinds of meals. But the thing is, they're very easy to make and they taste pretty good. Now, if you think if we had a disaster, you'd be hanging out at your house for as long as possible, then this is a chance to keep a few more canned goods, fruits, and things like that stored up, so you can survive for as many days, weeks, months as you can possibly do before you may be forced to bug out. So keep in mind, you most likely will have to bug out eventually. So you want to also have the dried food and be able to go mobile if you had to. But in the meantime, if you're sheltering in place, store up your cabinets with a few, like us, we have a spare bedroom and have a prepping area in the closet just for extra food, extra water, all this equipment that we're talking about, the crank radios, we have them. This is not something that I'm just suggesting. I'm actually doing this too. And it's, I wish I could do it all at once. It can be kind of expensive, but if you need to break it out for a while, do it. But the sooner the better. Number 19, this one is something actually I've been learning how to do too. Now, the very first picture closest to me is my own garden, and I've actually been learning how to do square foot gardening. But number 19 would be learn to grow your own food. Now, this is kind of a long-term plan, especially if you decided to stay in place. But learning how to grow your own food is critical. But keep in mind, seeds is the key. So if you are thinking that maybe you'll be holding out in your own shelter and maybe even trying to grow your own food, and keep in mind, you got to have water. And so now, in a sense, I have a pool right next to this garden, so I have a water supply, but how long would that last? And anyway, but if you still have able to get water, it's a little different in the Northwest, but Arizona, we can grow a lot of things, but we need that magical thing called water. So keep in mind, learn how to grow your own vegetables, your own food. And it's amazing. Our small garden that we have here that you see out to my, right next to me provided us with a lot of food. I was really surprised what we were able to grow. We're actually enlarging our garden to a different part of the property so we can actually produce even more. But most of all, seeds is going to be the key. So if you're buying seeds, buy extra seeds and store them, because you will not be able to get them if we're in a time of crisis. Number 20, first aid kits. Yes, we always need those around no matter what, but you're going to want a good first aid kit, not just a simple first aid kit, because Lord knows what kind of injuries we could have, especially if you have to bug out. So I would not go cheap on this at all. Find yourself a good first aid kit and keep a couple things in mind. One is, how versatile is it? How long lasting it would be? How much of everything is in there? And also, can you carry it? Make sure that it's a size that you can handle. So yeah, first aid kit, critical to if you're staying in place, traveling, and if you have a bug out location that you want to go to, make sure you have a first aid kit there too. Number 21, stock up on vitamins. You can do this just through multiple vitamins. They actually have survival tablets you can see. You can get a mixture of different kind of vitamins, but just remember, your eating habits, and especially if you're bugging out, may not be balanced. So having supplements would certainly be helpful. Number 22 is radio. So when if we lose our power, or our cell phones probably will go down too, we'll be falling back on good old-fashioned radios. Now, if you get a radio, AM, FM, probably AM is the best stations to be able to get, and they're battery operated. Make sure you stock up on batteries. But for actually very reasonable prices, and I bought one myself, is a crank radio, which actually has not only crank but also a little solar charger on it. So no matter what, no matter how long and whether I run out of batteries or anything like that, I will always be able to listen to the radio for any emergency broadcasts, or at least find out what's going on in the world. Number 23, communication device. So our cell phones will most likely not work, and certainly not our internet probably. So having a couple forms of radios would be good, from your walkie-talkies to VHF, whatever you can afford, but having communication to the outside world, and possibly with your own party if you're doing things where you're separated. So yeah, having a radio and communication devices. Once again, remember that you're going to have to have batteries, and it probably would be a good idea to get batteries that you could charge up with a solar device. So yeah, communication. Number 24, and you're not going to like this one, but personal hygiene. And what are you going to do when you run out of toilet paper and you go to that grocery store and then those shelves are empty? Going to be a problem. And so there is a few things to consider that you could do. One is you can buy hygiene kits, and that's great, but that's more to carry. But also, one of the best suggestions I've seen out there for survival is irrigation bottles. I have a picture on the screen here of one where you can actually irrigate your personals, and there's so many. There's going to be empty bottles of water all over the place, and if you can use those and put water in them, you can use that as an irrigation system. It's not fun, but certainly would be nice to make sure that you stay clean in your personal hygiene areas. So there you go. Make sure that you prepare. If you think you're going to bug out, these are things to consider. If you think you're going to stay in place, stock up. Costco, man, you can get a lot of extra toilet paper and paper products for very little money, and really stock up if you really had to. Number 25, and I've mentioned this, but I want to bring it up again, more critical. Let's say you have your beloved pets, a beloved cat. What if you have a small newborn baby? They're going to have special needs, Similac, different kinds of food, dog food and cat food, things like that, and any other kind of pet you may have. Will they be able to survive along with you? So like Sherry and I, when we prep, we also keep an extra bags of dog food and cat food in our storage, because we do love our animals, and for our dog, which is a chocolate lab, we may depend on her for safety and for alarming. So yeah, your pets, important. Kids, of course, their food needs are a little different the younger they are, so keep that in mind when you're prepping. Getting to number 26, sewing kits. Kind of look at this in two ways. One is you can get survival kits where they have safety pins and hooks and things that you can actually make snares and stuff like that, but things to hold your clothing together. And of course, a sewing kit to fix holes and stuff, because guess what? Getting clothes, it's going to be tough, and you want to maintain what you already have. And some of them are just very simple fixes. A good jacket, it might get a hole in it or something. You can't afford to lose that jacket, so you got to learn how to sew, at least basic. Of course, things like duct tape, that comes in handy too, but sewing kits, make sure you go and get one. Number 27, fuel, propane, things like that you depend on for cooking or heat or light. For example, I would probably end up using my little propane Coleman stove a lot. So I've stocked up a lot on the little green propane canisters. And I should be able to hold out for quite a long time with a couple of cases of those. Maybe you prefer butane, or alcohol stove. Those are a lot safer in a way. And fuel, some reason you might be using a generator, or maybe want to have be able to use your transportation a little bit. Having spare gasoline around is always good to have too. If you know you're going to be dependent on some type of fuel, stock up on it. Number 28 isn't so much an item as it is a backup plan. Yes, a backup plan. So let's say you have a plan. Plan A is you're going to stay in place in the house, and things go nuts. People are going crazy, and you find it's just too dangerous to stay in your neighborhood. What could be a quiet neighborhood could, people that are desperate will work their ways out to find resources, and maybe you can't feel like you can't hold them off anymore. Maybe the climate, maybe the disaster happened here in the Southwest instead of the Northwest. Maybe you're like, well, maybe we need to head up to the Northwest. And so the perfect plans can go amok. So be prepared to change to a backup plan, a plan B. What is plan B? For us, it would be hold out as long as we could in our house, and then we have our RV located in another place up north, where actually long-term survival would be a good place to go to if we needed to. It depends on the situation. It depends if we had a nuclear issue happen, or maybe we had flooding, or maybe we had a power grid go down. Maybe we had an EMP where we just don't have power, and it's too hot to stay in Arizona. That would change your plan. Your plan might have been just stick it out, but if it's 110 degrees every day in Arizona and you can't keep cool, you need to head north. So have a backup plan. Plan A, plan B, maybe even plan C. Always have a backup plan for your prepping and survival. Number 29, which is actually quite important, surviving on your own as a lone wolf is not necessarily the best way to go. The main thing you may want to start looking for, and maybe there's even groups around that are already kind of predetermined, is you want to join a community. Everybody has strong points and everybody has weak points. Some people can sew, some people can hunt, some people are strong, some people can hike a long way, some people are good at planning and engineering, some people are good at growing things, some people are good at making things, and so that can make you more powerful in a sense in order to survive long term. So keep in mind to be part of a community actually has a lot of benefits. It happens all over the world, and there's, if you kind of look, even some of the pictures that I'm showing here will show that different countries know the power of community. Take advantage of each other's skills, and you'll go a long ways. And finally, number 30, shh, it's a secret. Yep. So, of course, this video isn't helping, but, I'm not giving out my location, and I'm not going too nuts here, but in your neighborhood, I would not advertise the fact that you've been prepping. Desperate people in desperate times will cause people to do things that you cannot imagine. You cannot imagine what life would be like, even close, if law and order went to pot, if food was scarce and people are desperate. They will do anything, I mean anything, to survive. Hard to comprehend, especially Americans are probably the worst, because we have it pretty easy, but we lose our resources, especially electricity. We're in a heap of trouble. And then people, it won't take very long for them, and I mean it'll be short. It won't take long at all for people to start getting desperate. And so the last thing you want to do is go around your neighborhood and say, guess what, I'm prepping. Not a good idea, because guess what, when they run out of food and they run out of water and they see that you're living just fine, they will find a way to either try to become your best friend or take it away from you one way or another. I mean one way or another. There'll be no mercy. And so, keep your prepping quiet and don't advertise it, especially around your neighborhood. It's going to get ugly, and you want to protect your family and stay healthy, keep food in your belly, and wait it out and see what happens. But this is our secret, people. So I'm still on number 30 here. What I want to do for the rest of the show is to do a little bit of commentary a little bit. And I hope these 30 things are helpful. I'll probably hit on a couple of other small things during the rest of the show, but my top 30 tips is right there. And once again, this is our secret. Well, I know I just reviewed 30 tips of how to survive and get through hard times by prepping and being prepared. And I know some people say, well, I don't want to, I'd rather be dead anyway, or, but it's in our natural, it's in our genes, you might say, and to survive. And so I want to go with the word hope. And I know that sounds easy to say right now, but humans tend to want to survive. And anyway, so it's going to be rough. I think the hard part is to comprehend what evil people are capable of, and desperate people. A desperate person may not be necessarily evil, but will do what's necessary to protect their family. And those bonds of family are pretty strong. I think some people would definitely be willing to kill and steal for it. The problem is a lot of them don't know how to survive. And so we're going to see a lot of people suffering, a lot of people probably suicides, and see some real ugly people. And you're going to have to be willing to stand up for surviving, and which means kill or be killed or things like that. And I know everybody wants to be passionate and help one another, but that may not be, you may not be capable, especially up front. It's not until maybe you discover a community to help prolong survivability, depending on what the issue is. That's the big thing. That's why we always have a plan A, B, or C. We don't know what it could be. It could be just a normal disaster. It could be a war. It could be an attack on our grid, terrorism, natural disasters, earthquakes, volcanoes, asteroid. And a lot of these things will, it could happen in another country, another place, but it could still affect us. Volcanoes could, if we had some major eruptions in several places at the same time, could actually change our climate. Of course, we have climate change. We could have the Earth change its axis. I didn't say that right, but change its angle or flip. Who knows? We could have a solar flare. Could be lots of things. And no, I'm not dwelling on gloom and doom, but if it's survivable, people tend to want to try to survive. And so, one thing I didn't do a lot of emphasis on is weapons. And you got to be kind of smart about that. I mean, there's people that definitely have like the assault weapons and things like that. Not really my cup of tea, but I could certainly see how important they are. I am a hunter. I've been a hunter for years, so I do have several guns or rifles, and I have several shotguns. And I don't own a handgun. Perhaps I should. I'm not against them. Just hasn't been my cup of tea. But what I can do is make sure I pick out the best one, the one that I can depend on the most, and have a backup. So I probably make sure I have lots of shotgun shells. One is for defense, two is for certain types of hunting, and the ammunition's fairly reasonable, and easy to operate. Then I have lightweight rifles like 30-30 Winchester or Merlin, 284 Savage, lightweight, kind of a, good for all, kind of like a 30-06. And then I have a bazooka rifle, a Browning 7mm Magnum 300, and it's a beast. It doesn't make sense to use, and if I fired it, half of Arizona would hear it. So not a real practical gun, and it's very heavy to carry. So these are things to think about, and a lot of it will come down to food and water, and perhaps even air. Having an air mask will come in handy. You just, I hate to go through all this trouble and find out that for the first 24 hours we need to protect our breathing, because we won't last long if you can't protect your breathing. You can go about 3 days without water, but breathing, that's kind of right at the second. So those are the things to consider. Now, once again, I don't want to sit here and talk about gloom and doom, but there's nothing worse than having something happen and then you go, man, I should have been a little bit prepared. Even if we're just down for a week or two, can you even survive 2 weeks without power? When the power's out, there's no fuel. The pumps won't work. The stores can't refrigerate food. A lot of things will be out of whack. And so, at least, if anything, just try to go for the short term of 2 to 4 weeks without power. And make sure you have enough food and water to survive. If you're in a cold area, make sure you have extra blankets, extra clothing, sleeping to stay warm. Cover your heads, because your heater is probably not going to work. And you certainly don't want to build a fire in your house, but maybe you can in your backyard or something. But heat could be a problem in places like that. Getting heat, and where I live, heat's not a problem. Staying cool. So yeah, what are you going to do? So those things I wanted to talk about and touch on before the show was over. Once again, I don't want to put anybody in a panic mode. I just want to see everybody prepared for either lightweight disasters or heavy duty. It's different in every region. If you're near the coast, could be an issue. Tsunamis, things like that. Could be a while before you could get help. And prepping would definitely be an ideal thing to do. So one of the things I wanted to do is ask you guys to leave in the comments and share your stories about what you're doing about prepping and your ideas. Do you have a plan A, B, and C? Do you plan on staying in place? Why or why not? Are you located in a place that you should be concerned? What are some things that maybe we didn't cover in the 30 tips in this show? That'd be great. Now, I'm not looking for, I don't need trolls. I'm looking for constructive feedback. And people that watch shows like this also like to read the comments. And I'm asking in the comments to help each other. When disaster happens, we may not be so eager to help each other. But right now, as a community, let's share our stories, share our ideas, share about certain things that you think everybody should have to survive, short-term or long-term, and give us your feedback. We'd appreciate that. For those of you who know me, I'm Rob from Arizona Talk Radio, and I'm actually talking from Arizona. Now, I'm also from the Northwest, so I've lived in the Evergreen State in Washington and Oregon, and I've noticed, and one thing, I haven't been in the Midwest. That's would be new to me. And of course, also down by the Gulf states and stuff like that. That would throw me a little. So one thing I guess I would suggest is if you're in a region like ours where it's hot, summers are extremely hot, and then for 8 to 9 months is pretty reasonable. And we have different needs here. If we're bugging out and we're going cross country and things like that, we do have to deal with some critters that you wouldn't have to deal with up in the north. Of course, up in the north, you got bigger critters that you have to deal with, like bear and cougars and stuff like that. So everybody's got their own challenges. So I think what I want to make sure that we talk about is our climates. Is here in Arizona, heat is an issue. Shade is an issue, and of course water. And Arizona is quite magical when it comes to growing things, as long as you have water. However, we do have some interesting critters like scorpions and rattlesnakes and black widows and things like that. Of course, other regions, other states have their issues too. Interesting, like I don't have to deal with alligators here, but you certainly would in Louisiana and possibly in Florida. And of course, other kinds of snakes and stuff like that that I wouldn't even recognize as being poisonous or safe, because I'm not used to that region. So when you're considering your bug out or your plan B or where you're going to go, I guess another thing is make sure that you study the region and understand what you need. If you're going up to colder climates, do you have the right kind of clothing? Do you have the right kind of shelter? Do you have the right kind of shoes? That's a big factor. Where down here, a lot of the shelter's good too, but it's more about the shade and protection from the critters. Shade, water, you're going to go through much more water down here. can you supply yourself enough water to maintain for a while here, as opposed up to the northwest where the rivers are rampant? You're not finding it, not here. If you're in Arizona, maybe you want to locate yourself more towards some of the reservoirs, or possibly we do have some rivers that, unfortunately most of them are controlled by the reservoirs, but that's our water sources. I would suggest still heading north if we're in Arizona. Now in California, along the coast, one of the biggest problems they may have is earthquakes and tsunamis. And so a very large population of people would be hurt and heading inland, and could be quite a factor, and wouldn't necessarily cause us to go into survival mode here, but a combination of something like that and then a grid problem. Now you got a lot of people have lost everything, including their prepping gear, and desperation. And those are the things to keep in mind. Now, I want to make sure that I throw out faith, and no matter what we go through, faith is important. And I'm not going to minister here all that stuff. I'm not an atheist. Doesn't mean I just believe what will be. I also believe that there's cause and effect for things, and also that smart, spiritual people can survive just well. In fact, they'll probably be necessary in a world like that. So just, you say, oh my gosh, how could God let this happen to us? It's a volatile world, and it's always going to be important that we have good people, good faith, and community. And Arizona when there isn't the desperation going on, are very happy and commutative people. However, I know that none of us could comprehend just what people are capable of doing, and that's a little bit scary. So we're getting down to the end of the show, and of course this is AZ Talk Radio, which is an hour show. And I wanted to remind you where you can listen to all of our other programs. We have several. Some of them are about business, some of them about jobs, all kinds of stuff. And so Arizona Talk Radio talks about Arizona, but also throughout different regions. We're also syndicated on Good Talk Radio. We actually all fall under what's called the Cutting Edge Radio Network. So if you want to catch our show and our other shows, we have a YouTube channel, Facebook. You can catch us on our podcast. Lots of sources, and we love to hear from you. So feel free to send us messages. Feel free to give us comments, and we'd love to hear from you. Arizona Talk Radio is designed to be community oriented, but without all the bells and whistles of like regular radio stations will drive you crazy. And you never know what kind of guests and kind of partners we have going on in the show. I do know we're planning on doing some more work about employment and businesses, and we're also planning to do a show coming up about swimming pools and children, and some of the challenges with that, and which I have that problem too. We have a little pool, and when the grandkids come over, it's really scary sometimes. You got to keep your eye on them. So a pool can be a wonderful thing, but can be a very dangerous thing too at the same time. And it takes a lot of common sense, which falls into this whole show, which is common sense. And once again, I'm not dwelling on gloom and doom, but I sure hate to be one of those people going, what if I if I would have prepared for this, if I would have had a few cases of water, what if I would have had maybe a week or 2 or 3 weeks worth of dried food, and how am I going to feed my pets, and how am I going to take care of the baby, how am I going to stay warm, how am I stay cool, how am I going to get shade, how am I going to protect myself? I mean, a guy could smash through my door and I couldn't do a thing about it. And I got to admit, I'll bring a little politics into this. Having our Second Amendment to bear arms is not only critical for us to have now, but it may be very critical that we all have something to protect ourselves and our families in the case of crisis, and certainly in war. So, yeah, I mean, I know people may not like guns and things like that, so don't own one. Don't get one. We hope that everybody that gets one, which is usually licensing and stuff like that, are reasonable and smart people that use common sense and safety. So, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So I want to thank you very much for listening to Arizona Talk Radio. I hope this prepping show was helpful to you. I highly recommend you do it, and maybe do it in stages. But, you know, I hate to be halfway through your stage and then a disaster actually happens. So I would say that you want to probably be timely and prepare yourself and ask yourself, do you want to do this for short-term survival, mid-term survival, or long-term survival? I mean, some people are building shelters. Some people are making panic rooms. Yeah, I mean, you can take it to any level you want, but you're going to have to use common sense and also use what resources are available to you. You won't be digging holes here in Arizona because, first of all, we have hard pan, so there's no underground shelter going on in this property. So, yeah, anyway, those are the things to consider. But once again, I want to thank you for listening to Arizona Talk Radio. I want everybody to be safe. You can check us at aztalkradio.com. That's where our podcast is located. If you have podcast software on your cell phone, you can listen to us that way, or go to goodmusicradio.com and listen to our shows there. We play on a regular basis. Check the schedules and you can find us, and we have several shows. So once again, thank you, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye now. Hey, thank you for listening and watching Arizona Talk Radio. Please take the time to like, subscribe, and share our videos all over the whole wide world. We'd really appreciate that. Till next time, bye now.